For 3,000 years, the Verthi archive kept one file sealed. It was labeled simply, Species Designation, Myth Class, Do Not Engage. Historian Several Khan had studied 1,000 dead civilizations. She knew every war, every collapse, every silence in stars. But this file was different. It was not marked dead. It was marked watching. The story began, as all old stories do, with children's tales. Across 100 alien worlds, separated by light years and no shared history, the same legend appeared. A species that slept beneath their oceans. A species that built nothing, because it had not yet chosen to. A species whose silence was mistaken for absence. The elders called them the sleeping kind. Parents used them to frighten children. Behave, or the sleeping kind will wake. No ship had ever found their world. No signal had ever answered. For 100 generations, the legend stayed exactly that. A bedtime story, useful for scaring the young and comforting the old. Then, 6 days ago, a research vessel near the outer rim picked up a transmission. Old, broken, barely more than noise. But the archive's translation core did not treat it as noise. It flagged the signal in red, cross-referenced it against a sealed file, and returned one line across every screen in the station. Match found. Mid-class species. Source, unknown. Several stared at the words until her hands went cold. In 3,000 years, no historian had ever seen that match return as true. She opened the sealed file for the first time. Inside was a single sentence, written by someone long dead, someone who had feared this exact moment. If you are reading this, the myth has answered. Do not respond until you understand what you are answering to. Several did not sleep that night. She sat alone in the archive, reading the old file again and again, searching for more words. But there were no more. Only that single warning, written by someone who had known something she did not. By morning, the signal had changed. It was no longer broken. It was no longer noise. It had become clear, steady, and calm, like something patient, finally speaking after a very long silence. The Verthi Council called an emergency meeting. 12 species sat around a table, all of them arguing at once. Some wanted to answer the signal immediately. Others wanted to destroy the receiver station and pretend it never happened. An old delegate from the Thrall Union stood and said something that silenced the room. We have feared the species longer than we have feared anything else. Not because they are strong, not because they are cruel, but because no one has ever seen them and lived to describe them. Several felt a chill move through her. That was not true. Someone had seen them. Someone had written the warning in the file. But when she searched the archive records for the author's name, she found nothing. No identity, no species, no date of death. It was as if the person who wrote the warning had never officially existed at all. That night, alone in her quarters, Several received a private message. It came through a channel that should not have existed, a frequency reserved only for archive historians. Sealed for 1,000 years. The message contained no words, only a single image, a star map, their star map, but with one new star added, glowing faintly, in a place where no star had ever been recorded before. Several brought the star map to the council the next morning. No one recognized the new star. No probe had ever charted it. No map, old or new, showed anything in that empty stretch of space. She sent a small scanning drone to look closer, expecting a delay of days before any answer came back. It returned in under 1 hour. The drone had found no star at all. Instead, it found a structure, vast, dark, shaped like nothing built by any known species. It did not orbit anything. It did not rotate. It simply hung in space, silent, as if it had been waiting there long before the first Verthi ship ever left its homeworld. The council ordered the drone closer. Several watched the feed with their hands pressed to the console, barely breathing. Then the structure opened, not with fire, not with weapons, not with any sign of danger. A single section folded outward, slow and deliberate, revealing a chamber lit with soft golden light. Inside, carved into the walls, were symbols. Several recognized some of them immediately. not because she had studied them, but because they matched drawings found in ancient nursery stories across a dozen alien worlds. The same symbols children had drawn for centuries, believing them to be pictures of monsters. They were not monsters. They were letters, a written language, hidden inside myths, waiting for someone to finally look closely enough to read it. Several began to translate, slowly, one symbol at a time. The first full sentence chilled every person in the control room. We did not hide because we were afraid of you. We hid because we were waiting for you to be ready. Behind her, the private channel activated once more. Another message, wordless, just coordinates. This time, the coordinates pointed directly at her. Several stared at the coordinates. They did not point to some distant system. They pointed to her own quarters on this very station right now. Her hands were shaking as she stood. Security offered to come with her. The council ordered a full lockdown of her floor. But something inside her, quiet and certain, told her this was not a trap. This was an invitation. She walked alone to her room. The door was already open. Standing inside was no monster, no ancient horror from a child's nightmare. It was a single figure, tall and still, wrapped in a soft gray light that made its shape difficult to fully see. It did not move toward her. It simply waited, the way someone waits for a person they have known a very long time. "You have been reading our letters," it said. Its voice was calm, almost gentle. "You are the first in 3,000 years to read them correctly." Several's mouth went dry. Why hide? Why let yourselves become a bedtime story? The figure tilted its head slightly. Because every species we approached too soon became afraid. Fear made them build weapons instead of questions. So we waited. We let the stories grow. We watched to see who would still be curious, long after they stopped being afraid. Curious about what? About why a species with no ships, no weapons, and no empire has survived longer than every civilization that ever tried to destroy what it did not understand. Behind several, alarms began to sound through the station. Sensors across 3 systems had just detected identical structures awakening. All at once, all glowing with the same golden light. The figure looked toward the sound calmly. "It is time," it said, "not for war, for the true story to finally be told." Word spread fast. Every species connected to the HFY network watched their own skies light up with the same golden signal. Fear moved through 12 worlds like fire through dry grass. Fleets were put on alert. Old war treaties and used for centuries were pulled from dusty archives and read aloud in emergency councils. Several stood beside the gray figure, watching the panic unfold on 100 screens. "They think this is an invasion," she said quietly. "It is the opposite," the figure answered. "For 3,000 years, this galaxy has measured strength by weapons and territory. We wanted to show something different is possible." One by one, the ancient structures opened across every system. But no ships came out. No weapons appeared. Instead, each structure released something small, data cores, drifting gently into local networks, offering themselves freely rather than forcing entry. Inside those cores was not technology for war. It was history. The true history of a species that had once had fleets, once had weapons, and had used them until nearly nothing remained of their own world. They had survived only by choosing, finally, to stop. "We are not a myth to frighten children," the figure said. "We are a warning few chose to remember correctly." Several understood then why the file had been sealed for so long. Not because the truth was dangerous, because it was uncomfortable. It asked every species listening to consider a question none of them wanted to answer. What happens after the wars are finally won? Across the council chamber, the alarms slowly quieted. Reports came in not of attack, but of open channels, waiting patiently for someone to respond. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone finally did. The response took 7 days to organize. 12 species, each afraid in different ways, slowly agreed to send a single representative to the golden structure nearest their homeworld. No weapons, no fleets, just people walking forward with open hands. Several was chosen to speak for the HFY. Inside the chamber, the gray figures did not ask for surrender, tribute, or apology. They asked only questions. What had each species built beyond weapons? What had they protected beyond borders? What did they hope for beyond survival? Some delegates struggled to answer. A few, ashamed, admitted they had never truly been asked before. Over the following months, the golden structures became something new. Not monuments to fear, but meeting places. Historians, scientists, and old soldiers from a dozen worlds gathered inside them to study the archived history the sleeping kind had shared. Centuries of devastating war, followed by centuries of quiet rebuilding. It was not a story of power. It was a story of patience. Several returned to her archive a different person. She sealed the old warning file once more, but this time she added a new line beneath it, written in her own hand. The myth was never a threat. It was a mirror. Look closely enough, and you will see yourselves. Years later, when new explorers asked her about the day the myth answered back, she never spoke of danger or invasion. She spoke instead of a quiet room, a calm voice, and a single golden light that had waited 3,000 years. Not to conquer anyone, but simply be understood.